Okay, so hi everyone. Again, thanks so much for joining us today for the National Research Collaborative for Foster Alumni in Higher Education webinar series. Just a couple of asks. First of all, please be sure to keep your videos off. For any questions that come up for you throughout the presentation, you can just type those in the chat box as they come up for you. What we'll do is we'll have our presentation today, and then at the end of the presentation, I will read out questions that you all have posed to our presenters, and then they can respond. Just a reminder that this webinar and all of our other NRC FAHE webinars are recorded and made available on the NRC FAHE website. If you don't already get our newsletter, please feel free to go to the website here on the slide, www.nrc-fahe.org, and sign up for to be on our listserv. My name is Amy Salazar. I'm on the executive leadership team for the NRC FAHE. And I just wanted to quickly, before we do start today's presentation, I want to let you know about our next webinar. So our October webinar will be on Thursday, October 15th. At noon Pacific time, 3 Eastern time. And the presenter that day will be Svetlana Spiegel. She's an associate professor at the Department of Social Work and Child Advocacy at Montclair State University. And her presentation, entitled Increasing Access to Post-Secondary Education for Expectant and Parenting Foster Youth, a Call to Action, will provide an overview of research on the post-secondary educational attainment among expectant or parenting foster youth, as well as recommendations for critical supports and services to assist those youth. So please join us for that. You can, the registration link is on our website, or if you're having any trouble finding that, please just send me an email. So our agenda for today is that I'll be introducing our presenters momentarily, and then they'll be presenting for about 40 minutes or so. And then at the end, as I said, we'll leave a little bit of time for some Q&A. So again, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box as we go, and we'll get to those at the end. Okay, so now today we have several presenters from the Educational Results Partnership, which is based in Sacramento, California. And their presentation, entitled Sharpening the View, Improving Foster Youth Data to Boost Educational Outcomes, will highlight the importance of actionable data to improve educational outcomes for foster youth in California. And we'll be started off today by Dan Kinney. He's a board member of the Educational Results Partnership, so he'll start off that presentation. So I'll hand it over to you all.
Great, thanks so much, Amy. I appreciate that. As Amy just mentioned, my name is Dan Kinney, and I'm a board member for Educational Results Partnership. And I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here today, and a pleasure to introduce to you our ERP team and present the work that we have done on foster youth. But first, I want to start by thanking you for your passion and commitment to helping foster youth. It's a population I have a very strong personal connection to and desire to serve. I want to share a personal story with you and why I believe the work we're doing at ERP is so critical to improving outcomes for foster youth, and why I think today's presentation is so important, and I'm glad you're joining us today. You see, my biological parents left me when I was 4 months old, but I was one of the fortunate ones. I was adopted by 2 loving parents who cared for me and raised me. My parents went on to adopt 3 more kids and provide foster care for some additional children. Growing up in a home with foster siblings allowed me to observe and experience things many people don't get to see about the realities, what life is like as a foster youth. I'll mention one sibling in particular. A new foster child came to live with us when he was about 10 years old, and ironically, I was exactly the same age at that time. And I remember getting ready for bed that first evening, and as he was putting on his pajamas, I noticed he had scars up and down his back and legs from having been whipped by his stepmom, who had previously raised him after his father had passed away. He should have been in the 5th grade, but since he could not read or write, he was put in the 3rd grade, by far the biggest kid in his class. My brother had a difficult time truly attaching due to the insecurities of not knowing when, where, or why he would be moved next. But this time, my brother did not move. He stayed with us. And although it was a struggle, with lots of support, encouragement, and love, he made it through and graduated successfully from high school. These are memories that have stuck with me for a long time until this day. And here's what I've learned. First, the sooner we connect foster youth with people who love and care about them, the better their lives will be. Second, providing direct supports is crucial, and clearly providing supports within the educational system can improve the likelihood of downstream success for foster youth. And that's why our work at ERP is so critical. With the data available and what we know how to do, we can predict the factors that will lead to downstream success and replicate them across systems. Today, we'll give you a glimpse at our data-driven approach for solving the many complex challenges facing foster youth and what the future holds. ERP's approach is unique because we're bringing together disparate data sets with focus on downstream success tied to an economic North Star for all learners. Our work in California linking disparate data sets to improve outcomes is a recipe for success that can be replicated across the nation wherever there's the political will to do so. I'm excited for our team to share the work we're doing, and I'll now hand it over to the rest of the team for our presentation, starting with our President and CEO, Jim Lanich. Thank you very much, and again, just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Jim?
Great, thank you, Dan. Hello to everybody on the call today. I really appreciate your leadership and your advocacy and your interest. I would like to start out by thanking our funders and partners. This is a group of leaders who are actively engaged with us. They are boots on the ground, working hard. This is tough work, and we couldn't do it, couldn't make any headway without them. So a heartfelt thank you to this group of our funders and partners. Next slide, please. This is how we do our work. We created this, and we've all had, on our team, have had many years in bureaucracies, and I myself served as a bureaucrat in Los Angeles for a good chunk of my career. Our educational models have been focused primarily on academic accountability and fiscal accountability. However, they have not been productive and yield productive outcomes, and they have not connected data across the system. We really haven't been operating as a system. We have been operating as independent silos and very, very incoherent model as when we look at what's working for kids moving through the system, what's working for the learners as they move through the system. Foster youth are our most disenfranchised populations, have been historically underserved, historically invisible, and we're working very hard to fix that. So this is a productivity model. What happens to the learners as they move through the system? We are now able, through data science, and that's what the mission of ERP uses, actionable data to accelerate educational productivity and economic justice. So that's the bottom line. We work very hard at organizing the data according to this diagram that you see here, but we start with the end in mind on the right side, the labor market, the living wage jobs, career ladders with a predictable wage gain over time. Where are foster youth in this system? Historically, we have had a system of do-overs at each part of this model, from pre-K to K-12 to community colleges, higher education, and into the workforce. There's been very little science associated with what's working for these kids as they move, and these learners as they move through the system. So we've kind of turned it on its side. We have brought the productivity accountability agenda forward. We are bringing science to the transition points, which I'll explain in just a moment. We're unifying the languages of higher education, of K-12, of little kids and of the workforce. It's been a Tower of Babel, very little connection in agreement with what constitutes success. We have thrown down the charge that economic productivity, educational productivity, a living wage job, where you land in context of median annual household income, what kind of job you get, where it is, what's the landing wage, is it a living wage, and do you have access to a career ladder over time, and the skills necessary to participate in the workforce in a competitive and meaningful way and live a life above the poverty level. Foster youth deserve this goal. Next slide, please. Now, throw in a whole big challenge, and that is the COVID virus and what's happening to this particular population and historically disenfranchised populations all over the globe. UNESCO put out a report 3 weeks ago that cited that according to their analysis, about 1/3 of the learners on the planet are missing from school. And this lost learning is just absolute tragedy and formidable challenge. So not only do we have the historically disenfranchised populations, which we knew there was achievement gaps, and we knew what the difference was between their more affluent counterpart, academic success, workforce outcomes, but now the economic disparities among those that are missing and not showing up because of a million challenges is a tragedy. In order to mitigate that, we're focusing our work on these past and present ways of looking at a reinventing the pathways, reinventing a coherent, reinventing a system into a coherent system. And in the past, we had state content and academic standards. Now we have curriculum aligned to workforce skills and regional needs. So it's not so much about academic proficiency in context of test scores. We're losing those test scores, unfortunately. We will probably lose 2 cycles of test scores. So the accountability associated with what you know and when you know it is being lost. So we're using the data science to bring in multiple measures based upon predictive analytics for a lot of things, which actually has some science behind it and actually can be used to understand the trajectory and the barriers and the accelerators associated with the strategies for this population. In the past, we've had prescribed pathways. Now we're opening up to much more choices. We have to. Economics is regionally organized. All economics is regional, workforce is regional, skills development is regional, educational pathways are organized according to a feeder pattern of regional institutions. Closing academic achievement gaps are now focusing on who has access to skills development in a much more predictive way in each of the economic regions throughout the country. College admission and persistence was a metric which didn't really pan out in any predictive capacity for who gets what jobs and what is your landing salary and wages and what's your career ladder over time. So now we are bringing much more flexibility and intersecting this with economic mobility, and it's not one size fits all. It's personalized learning, scientifically based, predictive analytics brought in. It's a whole new way of organizing our accelerators and our levers for success. Data has been historically housed in institutional silos, and now we're integrating that data, actually matching it from leverage point to leverage point. Next slide, please. Here is a picture of those data linkages. So historically, there has been no science between these linkage points, and we had massive do-overs that are very inefficient. They have been loaded with implicit and explicit bias. They have been non-scientific, and we have has not served with any productivity at all. Now, for the first time in this regional model, through data sharing agreements and through regional collaboration and synergy among all the different sectors in a labor market economic region, we can link these data all the way through and bring some science and some predictive analytics to the levers that accelerate the learners. Next slide, please. Here's a picture that's a little bit more dialed in. These are our momentum points. We're bringing the data science forward to understand the relationship among these different momentum points. They're very important. They mean a lot. So just think foster youth, foster youth, foster youth, foster. For each one of these, isolate as a separate population. We now have the data flags. They're not enough, but we have something for the first time in the history of this notion of productivity in the educational throughput pipeline, that foster youth are important and we can isolate them according to what's working and replicate those bright spots. And next slide, please. And now with that, I'd like to hand over this to Dr. Lysha Lewis on our team, who's going to explain a little bit more about youth data and research. And I'll come back at the end and put a bow on some of this and explain a little bit more about how we do our work at ERP. Lysha?
Thank you, Jim. Hello again, my name is Lysha Lewis, and I'm happy to be able to share with you our foster youth research efforts to date. I would like to point out that the research we conducted was possible with the support of our partners and also CalPAS Plus, California Longitudinal Intersegmental Student Data System, which ERP manages in partnership with the California Community Colleges, Chancellor's Office, and the San Joaquin Delta College. So our research reports were focused on identifying actionable data that can be used to improve outcomes and increase support for foster youth students. Each of these reports has helped to expand the data available to practitioners and policymakers in California. I'm going to review 3 of the reports. Our first report was in 2015, titled Charting the Course Using Data to Support Foster Youth College Success. It showed that foster youth who enrolled in post-secondary educational institutions face significant academic and economic challenges, and that student support programs specifically for foster youth may address some of these issues. Following this report, we then produced our second report in 2017 titled Accelerating Success, Turning Insights into Action for Foster Youth at California Community Colleges. This report highlighted the importance of early alert systems and indicated that providing targeted support to a large percentage of foster youth on campus leads to better outcomes for these students. And finally, our most recent report published just last year entitled Pipeline to Success, Supporting California Foster Youth from High School to Community College confirmed that the academic achievement gap between foster youth and their peers illuminated the persistent barriers to a successful high school to college transition and highlighted the key role that both counseling and financial support play in foster youth college success. So a common theme among all 3 reports is that ultimately linking disparate data sets and improving the sharing of data leads to greater insight for the field, and having these insights and actionable data readily available is critical to making decisions that can improve outcomes for all students, especially those in the child welfare system. Now, this is a brief summary of our research findings. I'm now going to introduce Vanessa Marrero, ERP's Senior Director of Outreach, who will now share some of the tools we have developed in response to those findings for California practitioners. In her role as Senior Director, Vanessa helps educate practitioners in the field on how to use these tools in CalPAS Plus so that they can track, monitor, and improve student outcomes and planning. Thank you, and welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis, and good morning, everyone. Before I begin delving into the dashboards, I want to first again start by thanking our wonderful partners in this work, the California Community College Chancellor's Office, and their work with us on the CalPAS Plus. This is California's longitudinal intersegmental student data system. San Joaquin Delta College, and once again, John Burton Advocates for Youth, and the entire Foster Youth Funders Collaborative. We are able to do what we do with their support. Next slide. Foster youth are underserved and have been deprioritized due to a variety of systemic factors. Our foster youth dashboard positions the field to truly know how well foster youth students are transitioning and where they are ending up in the workforce. The literature has demonstrated foster youth barriers and navigating the many systems in which they receive services from. Understanding the needs are critical to any onset of work. The field may launch an effort to support these young people. And furthermore, understanding school mobility patterns can support agendas for connected learning. ERP teams work together to ensure dashboards have the data coverage necessary. The metrics measured align to milestones for student success in and outside of the academic environment. And given this principle, we offer two foster youth dashboards, the 1914 dashboard and the community college dashboard, each deliberate and supporting the educational arena as individual segments and also as a collective. Next slide. First, the Foster Youth 19th dashboard allows secondary educators, advocates, and practitioners to understand how foster youth compare to the non-foster youth peers in high school. The field can view by district, region, and statewide by academic year. There is an option to also view student groups in comparison with students who are not identified as foster youth. This is important to understanding the equity outline factors related to disproportionality. The dashboard has 4 table areas: students, high school achievement, post-secondary transitions, and post-secondary achievement. A particular highlight today is the post-secondary transitions. This represents the transition to college for planning access and matriculation activities to engage students in college pathways, which will boost persistence within cohort student groups and towards workforce factors. Next slide. We want to highlight several broad level insights. The field uses Foster Youth 914 dashboard to better understand students' school mobility and suspension in order to maximize attendance, instructional time, and connected learning. It looks at enrollment with a lens of diverse academic, social, and emotional rooted metrics by leveraging multiple measures with a laser-like focus on specific populations of students, our foster youth. The field uses a tool to bolster monitoring persistence over time and capacity development of new efforts, such as workforce readiness and management of programs related to student needs. And the field uses the tool to better gain support for efforts in reduction of equity outline gaps so that it may meet continuity planning efforts and also opportunities for practice calibration. Next slide. This is a post-secondary transitions metric. To your left, you will see the applied to community college metric. This milestone is a huge step for students in submitting college applications, ensuring every student in the 12th grade year at every school applies to college, key to upward mobility. We have seen the field focuses on foster youth identified students. It will lead to additional efforts in maximizing college application management at the macro, meso, micro level in any given year. Critical to engagement efforts. And to your right, you will see the enrolled in community college metric. Field practitioners are empowered to think through ensuring students direct access and timely matriculation. The metric provides assistance to leaders and other practitioners as they develop student planning processes, and with the goal that all foster youth students will attend the first-year college semester. Included in the data represented here are students who are concurrently enrolled in college, propelling the intersegmental collaboration effort to connect students to support programs and offices on the community college campus. And in addition, the work with our local community and expanded learning organizations are key to implementation of college and career success support strategies across the system. Next slide. Now, let's look at the Foster Youth Community College Dashboard, aligned to milestones and which provides insights on a variety of areas, including workforce outcomes. In this dashboard, you can upload cohorts such as Guardian Scholars, for example, and others to really understand how these specific group of students are doing. The utility of the Community College Dashboard reflects achievements of students so that we optimize community college support services and to understand transition landscapes. Occurring with a practice focus on intersegmental institutional networks, its output to workforce sector occupation maximizes livable wages earned by region. Next slide. While the Foster Youth Community Dashboard looks at metrics around equity, access, completion, transition, it also looks at metrics of employment and wages earned. The field uses this tool to better understand the foster youth students' financial aid awards and participation with special programs, especially for students with disabilities and who are identified as economically disadvantaged, while also the positionality of the data for stackable credentials. The field also uses this tool to bolster educational planning for students as a whole and in the first year, and those who hold grants, while also the upward mobility and preparatory experience to increase annual earnings. And the field uses the tool to support reduction of equity outline gaps, meet equity plan goals with a higher input and output of wages and overall student return of investment. Focused on decreasing unnecessary instructional seat time and also the decrease of the overall student financial investment. Next slide. The transfer metric here represents an important variable amongst four-year institution and also earned credits and non-credit certificates, which positions the system towards stackable credentials that meet market demand. The stackable credential is earned over time, and students focus coursework and skill development in the given occupation and industry. This is critical to increasing earnings potential. Next slide. The completer securing employment metric focuses on learners transitioned out of the former academic institution and who have changed status employment. This is unemployment status to employment status from post-secondary academic institutions to workforce. The percentage increase the need of data science tools so that practitioners can enhance support services to promote upward mobility and preparatory experiences. Next slide. Here, the attain the living wage metric focuses on learners that attain living wage for the region through their college and where their college is located, following out of the post-secondary academic institution. The percentage indicates the need for data science tools in which practitioners can use to support higher input and output on wages with preparatory experiences to yield a higher return of investment. Next slide. which takes us to median change in earnings. From a learner's perspective, the return of investment, the ROI. This metric represents learners' earning change increase over time. This is creating conditions that support higher input and output of wage earnings by leveraging these preparatory experiences of the stackable credential model, furthering a dynamic insight. That is, the tools ERP has developed in partnership with the California Community College Chancellor's Office empowers practitioners with cutting-edge data science and predictive analytics necessary to implement a suite of practices and policies. This will focus on the decrease of unnecessary instructional seat time and increase overall financial assets, while also reducing student financial investment. I hope that this information has been helpful in showing practitioners what is possible and where we are headed. And I will now transition the presentation back to our President and CEO, Jim Lanich, for his final comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. So where do we go from here? You know, we start with the end in mind, and we acknowledge that the system as currently designed is not coherent, and that the data is siloed and disconnected. And the disenfranchised populations, such as foster youth, suffer the most because they're lost in the averages. And now many of them have disappeared. And so we have to rethink some strategies or all the strategies of how we support them, find them, support them. And it's not just get the system working again, it's fix the system. The educational productivity way model links these learners across the silos. And we can, for the first time, start to understand what's happening to them. When you have an economic North Star established, then it allows us to organize ourselves in terms of a coalition of the willing in a regional model. Like I said earlier, all economics is regional, and we are developing these regions all throughout the United States. We have them in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. We're now organizing the Houston, Harris County, soon to launch into Allegheny County in Pennsylvania. We have Stockton, San Joaquin County, Stanislaus County here in Stockton, Modesto region. We have the city and county of San Francisco. And I invite all of you to shout out for any ideas you have or any help that you may need from us. Like I said, we work with a coalition of the willing, and we're willing to share our expertise in design and whatnot on our change agent modeling, on our solutions engineering, and we're good at aligning disparate groups of data. Please look forward to our upcoming reports. Please email us and let us know who you are and what you need. Connect with our experts, and we're willing to share everything we have. The charge is too important. These learners are worth it, and this problem more than ever has to be fixed. So with that, I'll hand it back to Amy for any questions that anybody might have. And I just appreciate your leadership, your participation, and please put us to work.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim, and to the rest of the presenters today. I appreciate that. So I'll encourage people to go ahead and type in your questions in the chat box, and I will read those out. I do already have a couple. So one question is, well, I think, and I think you addressed this a little bit, but maybe you can say a little bit more. Are any of these data tools available to other states, like the dashboards, and what does that look like? What might that look like?
This is Jim. So I think the way to answer that is, best practice is best practice. And of course the thinking is available. It's once you have the data organized according to your data elements, and people often don't know how to do that. So that's the place to start. And then how to get the data sharing agreements going. We don't wait for the states and the federal government to hand us these data splits. It's very inefficient. So we go through local data sharing agreements. So the dashboards are the easy part to build. Organizing the coalition of the willing and those that are willing to share their data. Of course, FERPA, HIPAA compliant, and we know how to do all that, keep it protected. But it's owned by those, so to speak, who are sharing the information for the purpose of acceleration of success. So the thing that is available is that we call it the hard work model, because it's hard work, and there's no silver bullet or necessarily a secret sauce, but it's all in the data and the data organization and the intention of the data. Action, 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 as opposed to compliance.
Thanks. So the next question is, how will COVID change your data collection or process or interpreting the data that you all are currently collecting?
Again, this is Jim, and others, please chime in. A lot is the answer. First of all, these kids are disappearing, so we need to, or have disappeared. So we need to match attendance records. We need to see who was there before, who was there after, what models of learning are keeping the kids, the learners engaged. What's the extent of the throughput efficiency? Is it less? Is it more? So we need to figure out who's missing first. So one big focus on that, especially in K-12 and in higher ed, is who's present. So those data splits of attendance records and historical records, longitudinal records of attendance over time will be more important than ever. Who's in what pathway, who's in what program, what's the treatment, what's the sequence of courses they're taking, what's the alignment with post-secondary success, with workforce transitions for all these populations. So the data, this is brand new, by the way, brand new. And we're pushing hard on coming at it differently so that we can figure out what's happening to the disenfranchised.
So the next question is, can you list the different data sources that you have linked for this, for what we're seeing today, for the data that in California?
Yeah, Vanessa, can you field that one?
Yes, thank you, Jim. I was also going to mention to everyone that if you are interested in access to these dashboards, please reach out to me. My email is there on that last slide. In reference to the foster youth students dashboard, there's several different metrics that are included into the 914 and also the community college. There's some commonality there. These examples of this are students enrolled, attendance rate, school mobility, suspension, special ed, so students identified as receiving special education services, students at the high school segment identified as concurrently enrolled in community college, students, school types, such as students attending a comprehensive high school, continuation school, alternative school, or juvenile justice institution. And also students who receive a GPA of 2.0 or above. This is cumulative GPA. And some of those are also shared with the community college dashboard. So I definitely encourage, you know, for more detailed conversation, connecting with me. Love to speak with any of you regarding these dashboards because, as Jim just mentioned, it is critical to the engagement of our young people, given what is happening with the pandemic.
And thank you, Vanessa. This is Jim again. One thing that I thought about while Vanessa was summarizing was special ed, another disenfranchised population for efficient data linkage to post-secondary and to workforce. And there's 13 different eligibility criteria in the special ed population. So regarding foster youth and the pandemic, what are the data elements we need to look at? You know, what's the difference between a student, experiencing autistic behavior versus blind versus a behavioral problem, or, you know, on the spectrum of some way. So what's happening to which population? So we need to drill down on our data collection according to eligibility criteria, as opposed to just a special ed tag. That's one big thing that we need to, that's significant in the pandemic consequence.
Oh, and there was a follow-up to Vanessa, to what you were saying. So it sounds like there was more clarification on where does that data actually come from that you were talking, the different data types, like is it mostly coming from the colleges, from child welfare? What are the sources of those? Where's that data coming from?
Yeah, let me start with the importance of local data sharing agreements. So in California, we have ERP and through CalPass Plus, and our partnerships have over 600 localized data sharing agreements where we get unitary level records, transcript level records from K-12. We also have those with 113 community colleges and half the University of California and half the California State University. So that's the model. And then we triangulate it with the state agencies and what do they have, and how do we make the most sense in a coherent way of the entire. But we're a regional model that depends upon local data sharing agreements. That's what we're building out in Texas, and soon in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Let's see. I haven't had any other questions come up yet. So I'll give people another couple seconds to type in any additional questions. But any final thoughts that any of you wanted to share?
I was just going to add to Jim's note around the annual plans for students with disabilities that, you know, federally, there are two indicators that specifically talk about career transition, college matriculation, training, apprenticeship, and things like that. And I want to just emphasize the need for the system coherence, and supporting these local direct MOUs so that we can garner more coherence for young people who are identified, duly identified, right? So identified as foster youth and also students with disabilities, which is, you know, so any partnership around the work with the group on the call is going to be essential to lifting the system as a whole, right? To be able to do just that.
I did have one other question come in. So the next question has to do with a lot of it says a lot of legislation is now including both youth, foster youth and homeless youth. Do you have any thoughts or plans to expand your work to the homeless youth population, or how those might overlap?
Yes. Again, coalition of the willing. Just let's. This is important. It needs to happen. So our plans are, we're just looking to make it happen. If anyone has any ideas, we definitely have identified these populations as our top priorities.
Well, thank you so much. I think we haven't had any additional questions, so I think we'll stop here. I'd like to thank you all again, Jim and Vanessa, and Lysha, and Dan, for presenting or for coming and talking with us today. Just a reminder, we'll be posting the webinar in the next few days on the NRC FAAG website. and we hope you'll join us for our next webinar in October. Thanks so much, everyone.